And I'm Matt Wally.
From the One Time Podcast.
Well, I hope you love listening to what we've been working on. We're absolutely loving doing it.
And as our guests get bigger and bigger and our conversations get better and better, all we ask from you is one thing.
Subscribe. That's it. Everything improves with that one little button. So please help us out. If you love the content, give us a subscribe. Hello, and welcome to another episode of That One Time Podcast, where we explore stories from interesting people doing cool stuff in the space of health, wealth and wisdom. Today's guest is Prasiddha. She's an Ayurvedic practitioner who has spent 2 years living in an ashram and has explored many of the realms of the Buddhist practice. The interview talks about health, wellness, spirituality, and all things in between. Enjoy. Prasiddha, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
How are you doing today?
Doing awesome. Cannot complain. How about you?
Yeah, good. It's 1 p.m. and I am doing my new career, which is recording podcasts. So,
apparently, that is your full-blown career. Like, we're on 16, you said?
Yeah, this will be episode 16.
That's wild.
I underestimated the challenge of a weekly podcast.
But you've been doing it. You've been really consistent. Yeah.
Well,
awesome.
I mean, I have to thank Mon, who's not here today. She's leading the charge on a lot of the editing, and she's doing a lot of reels. And
that's so nice.
Yeah, it's really cool. We've also had people come out of the woodworks to help us. So, yeah, we've had a guy just DM us saying, I work in audio editing. I'm keen to edit your podcast. So he's been super helpful.
That's amazing. That's so nice.
Which is dope. So shout out to Will.
Shout out Will.
Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much kind of where it's at with the podcast at the moment. But I'm loving it. Absolutely loving it. How's your podcast going?
It's slower. I'm only on like episode 3 or something. I've been super out of it the last 2 weeks, so it's inspiring. You're inspiring me to get back on my podcast game.
Do it.
Yeah.
I'll have to jump on it.
Yeah, you gotta come on. It's like the podcast swap of the century.
Love it. Well, we met in Tulum and then became good friends and hit it off over the last 8 months.
Wow, that's weird. I feel like it was not that long ago.
June, July. No, it was June.
May.
Earlier.
It was May. It was May.
Yep.
Even earlier, yeah.
Time flies. And, when we met, you have some pretty wild stories, and the more I uncovered about you, the more the wildness of your life uncovered, and it's pretty cool. It's so I'd love to talk to you about your journey to date, and the combination of your business, your spirituality, how you've navigated the world, and all those bits and pieces. So let's get into it.
Wow, just that.
Yeah. So what are the contexts of your early years that allow us to understand you as a human?
It's a great question. Love it. The context of my early years. I had a really intense childhood, and I know we bonded on that at one point in Mexico, but I had so much on my plate as a kid, and I was the firstborn child, and I was raised in a super Catholic family. I went to Catholic school from kindergarten to 8th grade, church every Sunday. And while I was living this, on the outside, really pure, life, my home life was something else entirely. It was a super crazy place to be, for most of my childhood, my home. And my father struggled with addiction, primarily of addiction to pain medication and alcoholism. And he was, at that time, a very violent, scary man to be around. And so that was kind of what I was coming home to a lot in my early days. And it really the reason I share all that openly is because, I mean, I'm a very transparent person, but also, you know, it formed so much about me, you know, and pushed me into everything that I'm doing now. I really played that role of like the perfect everything, like the perfect performer, you know, make everyone happy, please everybody, be the perfect daughter, the perfect student, the perfect sister, mitigate conflict as much as humanly possible, you know, sacrifice anything to make everyone happy, really, was, you know, how I was operating. And it was such a weight, obviously, you know, it was such a weight on me, living to that crazy standard, that impossible standard that I was holding myself to, for all of my childhood and adolescence. And, you know, because of that, I achieved a lot, right? From the outside, I had it all going on. I was like top of my class and got into some of the best universities in the United States on scholarship, and was vice president of my high school, and, you know, friends with everybody, and in Model United Nations, and running the humanitarian club, and working after school to help my mom pay the bills. Like, I was a crazy person. And I was really suffering inside, like, with all that, you know? I should say, amidst all that, I was really suffering inside. And that's really what pushed me. That's what pushed me really hard at like 18 to start my journey pretty young, you know, into looking into self-help, therapy, spirituality, all of it, really initiated for me at that point, because I couldn't keep living that way. That's the honest truth. I was like at a point where I had to go one of two ways, and option B was not a good one, and so I chose option A, which was, I gotta take a really hard look at everything I have ever believed about myself or about life, and start to really learn who I am, who I really am, and what really drives me and why I'm here, and start to heal a lot of what I was carrying around.
Yeah, well, and then what happened?
Then I moved to Ecuador. I actually lived in South America right after high school. Yeah, when all my friends went off to college and everything, I had this really soul calling, there's no other better word for it, to be of service. I really wanted to join the Peace Corps from like a really young age. Once I heard about it, I was like, oh, I want to do that. I just want to go like be on the ground, hands-on, helping people. I didn't really know what that looked like at the time. And I heard about this gap year program, and I went to apply. I got in, I got scholarship for it too. And I was at this precipice when I was 18, where I is like, you know, everyone around me, my family friends, my friends were like, why in the hell are you going to move to a third world country with a backpack and live in the rural whatever and not go to all these colleges that you just got into? Like, you're crazy. And so, you know, I had to really follow my gut, and I did, and I'm so glad that I did. And I went to study, or to, I guess I should say, really volunteer that whole year in the program. I got placed in the Andes Mountains in a little village in Ecuador called Zuleta, and I lived with a host family there for a whole year. I didn't know any Spanish when I moved there. I couldn't communicate. I was like, no habla español. No español. I went to move there, and I was like, in all senses of the word, the most alone you could possibly be. I was like, right? I was the only foreigner in a village of indigenous people in the Andes Mountains who didn't speak a lick of English. So I was like physically standing out like a sore thumb. For those of you guys who don't know me, I'm 6 feet tall. So I'm like this gringa, like 6 foot tall girl planted in the middle of this village. And I can't even speak anything. So I'm like a baby, you know? I have to be like talking so dumb, embarrassing myself all the time, but that's how you learn. You know, that's how I learned Spanish, like almost fluently. And yeah, during that whole time, my whole life really got evaluated, because again, I was like away from everything that I knew for the first time in my life. That's why I like highly encourage people that I know and their kids to actually do something like this before they go to college, because I got such a deep clarity on who I was and what I actually wanted to do before I went and wasted time and money at college. That was so so amazing to get to give myself that time. And that's when my spiritual journey really kicked off. And the whole time I was there, for the first time in my life, I was questioning what I had been raised in. I was like, what do I really believe? And who am I really outside of what everyone says that I am? Like, who is this? Who really am I? And I started meditating for the first time in my life. I started journaling. I started praying a lot too, to the God that I knew at that time.
What age was this? So at 18?
Yeah. And I was just working all day in the mountains by myself. My job was like biological preservation. So I worked with endangered species, predominantly condors, and I hacked trails with a machete all day. I like cleared trails in the forest, and it was pretty lit, honestly. It was awesome. And my mom, like my family is like, how's it going? Like, honey, how are you doing over there? And I send a picture like hacking trails with a machete, like alone. And they're like, what the heck? Like, what are you doing over there? And yeah, that was the beginning of everything though. I started to look into lots of different spiritual traditions, and eventually landed into Buddhism. And that's what really like enticed me more than anything I had learned up until that point, because you know, being raised in the church, it's much more about belief and faith, and dogma, and the morals. But in the Eastern tradition, it's what I felt I was missing my whole life, which is experience. It's not about belief. It's not about so much faith. It's about direct experience, like really discovering your own connection to life and to consciousness and to yourself. And I thought that was so beautiful. So I got really interested in that at that point. And then I ended up going to India, and that's where everything else happened.
Cool. So, I mean, I don't want to interrupt a good story, so continue.
Okay. Well, I'm ranting.
No, you're not.
So my brother came to visit me when I was living in Ecuador, actually, still, and he's my younger brother by a year and a half, but he started his process of self-discovery and spirituality like really young, like 13 or 14 years old, and he was always the rebel, you know. He's like the younger brother, like he was the rebel, and he was like, I don't prescribe to like school or government or anything, like authority. And he was like on his own path. He comes to visit me, and he's like, sis, I want to go to India. I think I've met my guru. And I was like, sorry, what? Like, what even is that? Like, immediately I'm triggered. I'm like judging the heck out of that. And I'm like, why? Like, what even? That sounds bizarre. Like, are you joining a cult or something? Like, what's going on? And you know, he tells me blah blah. He was long into Eastern tradition as well for a long time, and he was really seeking for like a teacher to learn from, because he wanted to go really all in and become a monk and all of this. So he tells me about this program that's happening in India called Inner Awakening, and it was happening. If I were to have gone, it was going to start 3 days or something like this after I came home from like a year abroad. I was like, you're crazy. I'm not gonna. He was like, I want you to come with me. I was like, but that's wild. Like I'm just getting back after a year, and then I'm gonna go spend an entire month in India. Like, that's so crazy. But I did it. I ended up doing it, and something again pulled me, like that same like part of me that really beyond my logic, like honestly beyond my mind, beyond my logic, drove me to go to Ecuador also pulled me to say yes to go to India. And so off we embarked. After right after I landed back home from Ecuador, I packed my bag and got on a plane again and traveled to India. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Truly no idea. Everyone who was there, pretty much, and it was like a program of maybe 500 people or so.
Oh, wow.
It was huge. Yeah, it was huge. It was in a holy city called Varanasi, also called Kashi, which is what my dog is named after. And this beautiful but extreme place in North India on the sacred Ganga River. And it is like, I land, and here I am in a taxi, fearing for my life for like 2 hours, because Indian roads are the scariest things you could possibly be on ever in your life, especially when you're not used to it. And we drive into the city, and it's like you're in the car, and cows are crossing the road in front of taxis, in front of motorcycles weaving between them, in between humans walking across the traffic, between like 7 dudes on the back of a motorcycle that should be holding like 1 person, and it's like honk 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 sound, create chaos, like no traffic signs, no lanes, no police. So it's just like, it's wild. And I'm like, whoa, like, where am I? What's going on here? And I spent the following 21 days or 25 days in this program with my brother and with all these other people that Swamiji, which is the nickname for our guru, was leading there. And it was, you could call it a yoga and meditation program, but that's really does not do it justice. And it was the first time in my life I was eating vegetarian. It was the first time in my life I was introduced to yoga. I actually had no experience of yoga, like in the Western world, which was such a blessing in disguise. So my first introduction to it was actually the direct lineage, and super legit, which was so cool that I got to like go right into that version of it. And all day, every day, we would spend 10 to 14 hours a day doing this process called the completion process, that you go through like every painful memory of your life. Like everything you've ever cognized as negative, whether it was pain, heartbreak, anger, depression, irritation, even small things like that. You go back to your earliest memory possible and then go through every conscious memory you can muster up until your current age, your current day. And you... What's it do to a person? It does a lot to a person. It does a lot to a person. This is the result of what happens to a person. And, even longer story, shorter, I went into weeks of this. We would wake up, we would do the morning routine of like yoga and cleansing techniques and all the like traditional yogic stuff, and then we would go into this process and we do meditation processes and things. And by the end of this month, I was feeling like a completely different person. And for the first time in my life, honestly, I felt this weight, this burden of weight, like that I was carrying my whole life released, honestly. And like this immense pain that I was carrying, finally I got to purge through that, and through that process. And the process included a lot, but you go through all these memories, and then you have to relive them by looking at yourself in a mirror into your own eyes, and like taking yourself back as if you're actually 5 years old watching this horrific thing happen in front of you, and feeling exactly how you felt in that moment as a child. And you go through like this every memory multiple times. And so people are just crying, screaming. No, it's wild. Like, everybody's going through their whole process. And by the end of that, I did more healing I had ever experienced in years of therapy before that. I had done therapy since like a little kid, and it only scratched the surface of what I got in these 3 weeks, and then I fell in love. I fell in love with all of it. That's really the short version. I fell in love with all of it. I fell in love with the Hindu tradition that I got to be immersed in there. I saw finally there was a spiritual path that I felt was an exact expression of what I felt inside my heart already as truth. And that was completely based in nonviolence. And that was what really drew me to it, was like the principle of ahimsa, nonviolence, of, you know, doing no harm, at least as little as consciously possible, in our lives, and seeing God in everything, that it wasn't this far off dude in the sky who was casting judgment and condemning people to heaven and hell that I knew wasn't true. I always felt that can't be it. That can't be it. That can't be all that there is. And the God that I was introduced to, which really you can't even call it that, but in Hindu tradition, is much more about consciousness itself and being within all things and everything, and us being direct sources of that and parts of that, each one of us, right? And that principle of treating all other as self. And so I just found there was such less hypocrisy than I had ever seen in other religions and traditions, and like people actually live by these principles, you know, like they're embodying that love and that compassion and that radical acceptance of diverse paths and people and traditions and experiences. And it's like there's room for all of it. There's room for questioning, there was room for intellect, there was room for so many things that before I was always told there wasn't room for, you know? And so yeah, I just fell super in love with it all. And that's what started off. That was in 2015. And since then, I have gone back and forth from India multiple times. And then I ended up living there for 2 years and really diving super deep, you know, and living in the ashram there. And that's where I got trained as a yoga acharya, traditional yoga teacher. And then I ended up coming back to the United States and getting certified in Ayurveda here, which is the holistic medicine system from India. And so that kind of, yeah, that's been my whole, you know, essence of why I became so connected to all of this, because I saw the power of it in my own healing. And I saw the power of it replicated for thousands of people in the years that I spent in India, coming and learning these things and like seeing how effective it was and how empowering it was. That was a big thing for me, because I found I really I resisted the idea of a path or of like a, you know, direction in a lot of ways, because of my upbringing in the church. I had so much fear of the corruption of that and the authority and all of these things and misteachings and dogma. But what I found is that in the East, religion isn't even religion. It doesn't even fit a definition, because there's no dogma. It's all, it's much more closely associated to a philosophy or a way of life than anything, you know?
What do you think that does to the way that the society, you know, exists?
I think that it creates, or I've seen it to create just so much more harmony, honestly. So much more harmony, and also so much more room for what we're here to experience. Like, really, what we're here to experience in realizing the self and living out our very unique purposes here on this planet and playing our part. Like, it leaves room for so much tolerance. And, you know, like, for example, within Hinduism, within the Sanatana Dharma umbrella, there is no conversion. It doesn't even exist. There's no conversion process because it's like, it's not even structured that way. So like the concept of trying to change somebody to your religion or even wanting to doesn't even exist. Like, it's like, what? Like, we never even heard of that word before, you know, that concept. Yeah. And traditionally, like for thousands of years, India as a whole is one of the only nations that has ever existed that has not invaded other places ever in its history. It's never sought to invade. It's never sought to conquer. It's never sought to evangelize. And I think that is such a, in my opinion, really mature, beautiful example of the way that we could be living as more places around the world.
I wonder what the the challenge of the Eastern philosophy is in a Western dominated world. I've always kind of, how have you begun to reconcile that element?
Oh, yeah, that's such a good question. It's like, I mean, it was born out of such a different system of life and culture, right? So I think, in a lot of ways it is shocking, and there can be like such a barrier to entry for Westerners. And that's why I think I've really ended up in the sphere that I'm in, because I want to kind of be able to be a bridge for that. There's so much terminology that is so foreign. I mean, literally, right? Everything is in Sanskrit, one of the oldest language in the world. You can't, I mean, and English can't even really fully translate Sanskrit. Like, there's so many things like this. And so I think as a whole right now, what we're seeing is we saw this kind of evolution, right? Yoga was the first kind of introduction to these things in the West. Vivekananda and Yogananda came in the 60s, 70s, and really popularized the concepts of yoga in Advaita Vedanta, or that Advaita branch of philosophy. And at that time, they really spoke in a language in Western terminology in order for it to be, you know, to break through the culture at that time and to be understood. And then, you know, after decades of, you know, aftermath of that, what we're left with is yoga. Huh?
Bastardized, it's not.
Exactly. It became now so far away from that, what it was originally, because it got pushed to the masses. And I don't consider that like necessarily good or bad thing. It is what it is. And I think it kind of had to happen that way to at least get known. And now we're seeing more of a like revolution of, okay, now we need to bring it back to the real thing. We need to bring it back to its roots. We need to come back to authenticity. We need to really take a look at how this has been like made a business, and let's go back to the actual heart of the true teachings and the true spiritual tradition of it, you know? And that's what's really beautiful and exciting though, because I'm seeing more and more people, especially in the world that I'm in, you know, online, are being drawn to that. You know, they want to know yoga beyond asana, beyond workout, which is not at all what it is. You know, and all that. And they're being pulled to the philosophy. They're being pulled to the values. They're being pulled to the healing and the meditative experiences that, you know, await them in that path. And I think that's really cool, really exciting.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I've noticed that from my personal yoga experience. I kind of began in a bit of it was in a crisis mode. I was super sad and depressed, and I needed something to get me out of the funk, and I couldn't find anything, and I came across yoga, and the combination of the hot room and the movement got me out of my head for the first time in a very long time, and then I was hooked. But it was, you know, kind of fitnessy still, and it did get to a very it reached its limits very quickly. And I realized very quickly that there was a lot more out there that I needed to explore in this space that the studio I was at wasn't quite, you know, able to provide. And that was okay, and they knew that. That's the role that they know they're playing. So it's kind of you'd rather a somewhat not traditional version of something that's a step forward. Right.
I agree. I totally agree.
And those who want to go further will go down the path on their own.
Exactly. Yeah. My guru actually once said, like, he put it so beautifully. He said that yoga is an independent intelligence. It leads you to its highest experience. And I've really seen that, like, be so true. Like, people, you know, yoga, like, even if you're going to, yoga at a 24-hour fitness gym, somehow, right, it's still, because it's so powerful, you still feel something when you're doing it where you're like,
what is this?
What is this? Yeah. Even when it's taught at a gym as a workout class, and it's like, it carries still this like presence, this tangible like essence that against all odds is not, somehow it's hanging on, you know, and people feel that. And that's why I agree. I think it's beautiful still, because whether somebody's learning it at Core Power or 24-hour fitness, when they start off, at least they're being introduced, and then the next steps will come.
I love when I'm talking to people who don't do much yoga and they say, oh, I just don't like it. And then I go, why don't you like it? And they're like, at the end when I have to lie in that thing, which is Shavasana, I don't like being in that space. And I'm like, then you need more yoga.
then that's exactly why you should do more yoga.
Because you should have no issues lying in that space for 5 to 10 minutes with complete bliss, with complete calm and acceptance of that moment. But a lot of people can't.
Right, and that's such a trip.
Because they haven't done the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it says so much. It says so much, right? Like, about the level that we've reached as human beings and just in our modern world, like how just so overstimulated we are and so pulled away from being in stillness and silence with ourselves. You know, it's like even when we're walking, we're listening to something in our AirPods. Even when we're working out, we're like blasting music. Or when we're meditating, we can't even be inside. Like, you know, it's like there's so much, we're so used to it, and it's so hard for us to not have ping, 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 notification, like visualization, sound all the time, that being alone with the mind for 5 minutes can be so scary in the beginning, you know? Yeah.
That's a secret. That's a secret too of the success of all of this.
Yes.
Just sit in that silence, because there's so much in there that you can. There's so many lessons you can take from just that quiet voice that's hidden under the layers of notifications and cherry vapes and. I'm on a war against these cherry vapes. I'm so sick. I'm so done.
Cherry vapes. That's so funny.
Oh, but yeah. We could go down a rabbit hole there. So I'll pull back a little bit. So is there a time in your childhood where you look back and you think, this is the reason why I'm sitting here today? And why is that?
Wow. I don't know if there was only one moment, but a conglomeration of some moments that, you know, immediately pop into my mind, which is, you know, we were starting off talking about, right, kind of growing up in that atmosphere as a child, being the older sister in that environment too, with a dad that was very unstable and abusive, I took on the role of protector. That was one of the roles that I, you know, carried. And while I was in it, of course, you know, I'm not going to deny or bypass that was really difficult, really, really, really difficult as a child to carry that and be there and in that space and in that environment. But I quickly understood, even within my teenage years, that I was unbelievably grateful that I had those life experiences, because it formed in me like an empathy, a compassion for people that is unparalleled. And I don't know that I would have been able to be that person or develop that in that way if I hadn't seen like the darkest things and really experienced a lot of pain. To be able to recognize pain in other people, and to be able to hold space and really be in a state of understanding in that, and the kind of the repercussion of that, and why I bring that up is because it was like how even from young age, like 10 years old or maybe even younger, people would come to me. Other kids, you would always come to me with their problems or their pains or their struggles, and I would always be there to listen. And for whatever reason, people felt that energy from me, you know, like she gets it, or like she's a safe space. And I really took that as such an honor, and I feel like it formed everything up until even now what I do. You know, having the responsibility of people's health, both mentally, physically, and spiritually. I take that very seriously, and it's a space that people are very vulnerable, and we have to be nurturing, right? And so tending to that, and so it really inspired in me so much compassion and empathy, but also seeing my dad, on the other hand, seeing my dad go through addiction. And interestingly enough, his addiction was to pharmaceutical medications that he was prescribed. And that really influenced me heavily, you know, in getting into holistic medicine, because I saw for most of my entire life all of the ways the system created, you know, that monster in some ways, and also the really the blind spots and the brokenness of it, of a lot of it. And it drove me to be really passionate, you know, really passionate and really, really fiery about it, because I saw the impact in my own life, in my own childhood, and with my own father, and I take it, you know, so seriously because of that, and so it really drives me, you know. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, for sure. So the combination of the challenging childhood and opportunities to be a listener and a support for people around you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Feel like this was a path that you needed to take. For sure.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. So, well, that's a good kind of segue into what you do. So tell us a bit about what you're working on at the moment, you know, and tell us a bit about Ayurveda, what it is, what you like about it, and how people can incorporate it into their lives.
Yeah, so Ayurveda is a holistic healing system from India. It's the oldest organized medicine system in the world. It directly translates Ayurveda, translates to the science of life. It's and it is really that. It is so much beyond just a medical system, but a way of living and understanding life in the human body. And I found, you know, after being involved in the medical field for most of my life and very pulled to it I always felt I was going to be a doctor as a kid. Like, you know, I was really inclined towards that my whole life. I started seeing, like, again, these ways that I did not feel modern medicine was doing a justice or a service to humanity in not doing any preventative medicine. Also, in short, I mean, you know, just treating disease and just treating something once it's already too far, but not, you know, focusing in these preventative and more integrative and natural ways to heal the body. And so when I found Ayurveda, I found it, I would say, first when I was living in India. And so at the ashram I was living in, it was the life, like it was just the lifestyle there. You know, everybody was eating that way, living that way, practicing medicine and care that way too. Like we had an Ayurvedic doctor there, like all of this. So when I was immersed there for 2 years in that and living with people, hundreds of people lived there from all around the world. There was some Indians, but there's people from every country you could think of. From babies to 90-year-olds was living there, and how I saw them living was absolutely mind-boggling to me. I mean, it was like, wow, I just entered another world from what I was raised in. I mean, people were so healthy, so vibrant, so happy, so at peace, and in just this state of such a beautiful, balanced, harmonious state of being. And I mean, I remember, like, so clearly, every time I was there, like, I would meet people and they would tell me their age and I would not believe them. Like, I would actually not believe them. I would be like, there's no goddamn way you're 40 years old. I thought you were my age. I thought this whole time we were friends. You were my age and you're 40. And then, like, there was even like 70, 80-year-old ladies there who were my students, my yoga students. And they would do rope yoga, like suspended yoga on the rope at 70, 80 years old. And I was like,
I love it.
This is amazing. What is happening here, right? And so it's everything.
Interject. I've got a
go ahead.
little saying I heard that I really like that ties into what is a bit confusing about where Western medicine sits at the moment. Hippocrates, kind of the father of medicine, had that thing where he said, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. So on a fundamental level, on what health and medicine and the kind of medical field is, underpinned from, there was an understanding that your health comes predominantly from what you eat and what you put into your body. But it seems like somewhere along the lines it's been lost and everything's gone to, you're acutely sick, cool, we can fix that. But they've forgotten the rest of it. And don't get me wrong, like if my leg gets chopped off, I'm not going to be going and putting a couple of herbs on it. Like I need some shit. I want the best surgery known to man. Right. But for the rest of it, it's most of the damage that's caused in our bodies seems to be very chronic, and it's all inflammation based, and a lot of that inflammation comes from stresses, and the foods you eat and all of those kind of elements. It just seems to be missed completely. But anyway, that was my little...
Yes. No, thank you. I appreciate that. And we could go on a whole tangent about why that is and how and why that happened, but that's for another day.
I'd love to hear it.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Yeah. I mean, there's many factors involved. But, and I'll come back to it. I'll circle back to it. But I just, like, exactly like you said, I am not against Western medicine by any means. I think there are strengths to it, like emergency medicine, urgent care, these kind of things. Absolutely. It's powerful and it saves lives. But for everything else, we need a lot of help. We need a lot of support. And I have found why I landed on Ayurveda is because I have seen it to be the single most detailed, evidence-based, and longevity-based system of holistic healing that exists. And I think it is so powerful how it treats the individual. It's one of my favorite things about Ayurveda and why I practice it, is because we look at somebody not as a disease. So for example, you have diabetes and my other patient has diabetes. You don't get the same treatment plan as them because we're not treating disease. We're not treating diabetes in you. We're treating Adam. And we're looking at so many things that make up Adam. What is Adam eating? How is he sleeping? What are his emotional states like? Does he have spiritual practice in his life? What is he ingesting substance-wise? How much water is he drinking? What supplements and herbs is he taking? So many factors. What's his digestion like? What's his pulse like? What is his tongue telling us about his internal organs? All of this we're looking at, and it is such a comprehensive way that once I experienced it firsthand, you go into an Ayurvedic clinic, you get seen, you're there for about 2 hours, usually. I feel like it's like the point of no return, because you realize that, holy shit, my whole life I've been going to the doctor and I've never been asked one thing about how I live. I've never been asked what I eat once. In most cases. I know there are some doctors that'll occasionally ask that question. But, right? And so it was just so eye-opening to me, and I saw that this system had just such power for not just healing disease, but more importantly, promoting health, promoting longevity of life. And that to me is like everything. It's like, what's the long-term benefit? Not the short-term, you might feel something immediately upon taking it, short-term effect, but what's the long-term effects of everything that we're intaking, whether it's food or herbs or medicines or through our senses, all of our senses, like what are we consuming and how is that affecting us? That's what Ayurveda is all about. So that's what I do. I practice. I have my own practice as well as my company, Ananda Ayurveda, where I sell sustainably packaged organic herbs. And I really created that because I saw there is such a need for that, like a really good source for that in the Western world, because these kind of herbs still are in a lot of cases hard to come by, or their quality is gone down, just like most of our industries and food in the world. So yeah, I source herbs, and now actually we expanded it to a bunch of other cool yogic products and things like this, and malas, and last thing that I just started doing as well is my mentorship and online course program called Dharma Healer Mastery. That's kicking off next month, and it's all about diving deep into the spiritual healing and mental, emotional healing solutions, technologies within yoga, within Ayurveda, and within Tantra, which are 3 different schools within the umbrella of Hinduism or Sanatana Dharma, and learning those applied sciences from the authentic sources, from the actual scriptures, from the actual tried and true lineages that they're from, so that we're actually getting the most benefit for ourselves, and we can share that benefit with our communities at large. So it's a program, just all about that, diving into these beautiful healing systems, so that we can come back to the source and really share from that space.
Might have to do that. You've definitely opened the door to all of this world to me that I never understood. We were talking about it off the podcast, and the first time I'd ever done any oil pulling was when we were together in that car park. Do you remember the car park? And I'm just you're take this stuff and swish it in your mouth for 10 minutes. I'm like, this is ridiculous, but okay. And and it's funny, it only began because I couldn't be bothered flossing. So it came from a place of just laziness. I'm like, this seems easier than flossing, so I'm going to do this. And to your credit, ever since I've been doing it, I've been oil pulling every morning since, and I've been tongue scraping every morning since, and haven't had bleeding gums in a really long time. And my teeth are so white. And I'm dragging all of my friends and all these people in as well. They're all starting to do it. So oil pulling. So why don't you just run us through what is going on when you're oil pulling and tongue scraping?
Yeah. So that's what I love about Ayurveda, though, because that's what I always say too to my patients who they're people who get referred by their family members, and they're why am I? My wife dragged me here. I'm not really sold. Kind of people. And I'm like, hey, respect, I get it. I'm a super academic person. I like to see the evidence. I'm like, okay, try it and tell me what you feel. What do you got to lose? And 99% of the time, people feel it. They get the results directly through experience, and that's all there is to say. You know what I mean? And with oil pulling, such a simple but such an effective way to promote oral health and the health of our teeth and gums. Usually we use an oil like coconut or sesame, which infuse a bunch of minerals.
Coconut oil.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's easy because you can get organic stuff in a big jar. And
exactly. And coconut's amazing. Especially for your dosha with all your pitta. But oil pulling is so nice for really, because what it's doing, you're swishing this oil around your mouth for extended period of time. Ideally, you want to get up to 15 minutes even, but it can be tiring in the beginning. You have to build a lot of muscles. You probably experience, you get sore from it, which is so funny. Or tired.
Much better now. It's it's definitely much I wake up, I'll make my bed, get some sun, and I'll oil pull. I'll tongue scrape, oil pull, and I'll go outside and I'll journal. And that 10-15 minutes of journaling is when I'm oil pulling, and it's just it's all good.
I love that.
It's not even harder, and it's great. It's way better than flossing. Fuck flossing. I just don't want to floss.
Yeah, and it's doing the job of flossing and more. Honestly, it really is, because it is pulling that oil through your teeth. Efficiency. Totally. It's pulling that oil through your teeth. It's also giving you the benefits of that oil. I'll speak on sesame. Sesame in particular is also amazing because it's super high in calcium and minerals that help remineralize your teeth and gums. So it gives you benefits with that, as well as it's giving antibacterial, antifungal, all that fun stuff effects. So does coconut oil. It's wonderful for freshening your breath because it also wipes out a lot of bacteria. And it whitens your teeth because coconut oil specifically is also a very good natural teeth whitener. So good. Why not? Why not do it?
Yeah. Maybe we should just go and I'll just get the oil from Woolworths and relabel it as teeth whitening oil.
Yep. Best teeth whitener available. Come get it while it's hot.
4 out of 5 doctors and dentists approve, or whatever they say.
Yes.
Oh,
so awesome.
Love it. Yeah. I want to loop back. You mentioned we were talking about Western medicine and how we seem to have lost our direction in a lot of this. And there's so many people that are highly overweight. There's so many people that are chronically, in pain. There's high inflammation. Everyone's smashing cherry vapes, and just people are addicted to low quality dopamine, and I think it all ties into one another. And you mentioned that people don't get asked the right questions, and it's like it's as though everything's hyper fast, everything's so fast, and no one stops and slows down, and people can't seem to sit in that silence, and that ties into how then they operate in the world and how they eat and how they treat other people. So, like, where do you think we've got lost? Like, what happened? Why have we got lost when?
Yeah.
What happened?
What happened, Adam? I think, the best way I would tie it all together through my, medical understanding and also my spiritual understanding of it both. We are extremely removed from nature. We have been removed from our natural habitat, and everything in some ways kind of goes back to that, we are away from, what happens when you put an animal in a cage? Right? There are so many things we have observed from this through scientific study and all this about what starts to happen to an animal when it's enclosed. They lose their minds. They literally lose their minds, and in some cases they even end up trying to self-harm, or like things like this. They go crazy and they develop all these behaviors right from captivity, and that might sound.
What's our cage?
I think our cage is, it's much more, it's obviously much less obvious in just one physical sense. But yeah, it is. It's not only cities, but the way that cities are operating, right? And everything around it. It's all of it. It's the environmental pollutants and toxins we're constantly around in the cities and suburbs that we've developed. It's the concrete mechanization of buildings and lives and structures. There's no trees, there's no grass, there's no dirt you're putting your feet in. You're seeing no sunlight because you're working a 9-to-5 job and the sun sets before you're even done with it. Your skin isn't even getting the signals it needs to know you're alive, you're in the daytime, you're here, and it's just this spiral of all these factors that have taken us just so far away from our nature. And the environment, the habitat that we are meant to be living in, and that, I don't know, that's my kind of opinion or how I view it, is like we're just so far removed from that, and everything else is like, a developing on that, right? We make plastic food because we live away from nature. We live away from farms. We don't see any of it. We don't have our own gardens. We don't touch the food that we're eating, right? Food needs to be faster because productivity is all that matters. So you feel guilty for even taking a lunch break in the United States. This is at least the case. Most people I know literally don't even feel they can take a lunch break. So it's like nutrition is the last priority. What we're putting in as our fuel is the last priority. It's all about this, productivity and output and just making enough. And it's this constant chase because it's never enough. And there's always the next things that you need, and more bills you have to pay, and the higher cost of living and higher mortgages, and right. And it's this never ending cycle people get trapped in, not feeling like they can take 1 second to pause, to breathe, to meditate, to cook for themselves, to go outside, to take a vacation, all of these simple things, but they're not small, they're not small, and they're so pivotal in our mental and physical well-being, you know? So it's crazy times. We have to do a lot. We have to do a lot to intentionally bring all that back into our life, because it's not just there anymore, you know?
And then, so how does that tie into kind of where we did get lost in medicine? So we've lost...
Yeah, so with medicine, it's a similar story in a lot of ways. I mean, it's a parallel story in a lot of ways, but it kind of goes back to the history of the American Medical Association in many ways. Before that, it was actually much more common in household, even at that time, which wasn't even that long ago, a few hundred years ago, to have more holistic, homeopathic medicine practices happening all over. Midwives, very active in practice, doulas, all these kind of things were still very much a part of life. When the American Medical Association began to be formed, and this whole, it was like really this what we see now was only created then. This construction of the entity we now know as allopathic medicine or modern medicine happened. Hospitals began to be, you know, a thing like we see them now. Having certain, like, this is the one way that we are going to treat and practice medicine became a thing at that time, right? All of this was heavily influenced by the people that have influenced pretty much everything from time immemorial in the West. Rockefeller was a huge part of the conglomeration of hospitals, and the American Medical Association. Bigwig guys like this were a part of it, that were industry tycoons, right? Industry tycoons, and I'm not going to go so deep into the details of this, right? But they wanted to, in short, profit off of people needing medicine. In short, and people...
They want to profit off the human life, yeah.
Profit off the human life, and you know, the funny thing is, it's like, this isn't even a conspiracy theory. You'll learn this even actually in medical school. Like, you'll learn some of this. They won't go into, of course, they don't focus on it, but you'll hear it. Like, it's a real thing, that why these structures were created wasn't. That's what I feel people need to kind of at least wake up to a little bit. Why these structures were created originally was never with the people's health as a priority. Not even from the inception. So it's really important to know that, hey, yes, good doctors exist, good medicine exists, good surgeries exist, but the structures they exist within have been very influenced and corrupt, for lack of a better word, from the get-go. And they have, you know, they're intermeshed with, factory farming, big agriculture in the United States, even like the resource industry, petroleum and all of these things. It's like so intermeshed with the same. It's really interesting the more that you dive into it, and it's become an industry, right, for lack of a better word. And that's
it is,
yeah. I mean, it's a hugely profitable industry, particularly the pharmaceutical side of things. Like that, I would say, is one of the biggest factors here, right? Is the pharmaceutical conglomerate that has come to be, and how medications are developed quite frequently, more than not, is that a drug is made and a disease is created for it. And that's like actually what's happening. The disease didn't exist before the drug was made. I was even in at University of Southern California when I was at college there. I took a class, some health sciences class, and they shared about this exact, like in detail, the process of how the drug creation process has happened for the last decades, and it was very eye-opening. And it's all this intermeshed biases between like doctors being in hospitals where they have to practice a certain way, even if they don't want to. Like, even if they wanted to take a little bit longer time with their patient, for example, and actually ask them about their diet, their lifestyle, all this, the hospital is like, nope, there's a standard here. You have to see 40 patients a day, right? There's things like this. You have to hit 40 patients a day. That means you get 5 minutes to go into the room with these people, right? And so like, it has just become an assembly line, right? In a lot of ways. And of course, what starts to happen is corners are cut everywhere, whether it's when it comes to, taking time with the patient, whether it comes to treatment of the patient, or even the educational process. For example, my good friend who is in medical school, she told me, and I've heard this from many people, she only had one day, Adam, one day where they talked about nutrition.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot.
In all of her medical training. And almost every single class that was required that she took was about drugs, learning about the actual drugs and how to prescribe them. Or I believe surgery. Yeah, she said surgery and pills, right? And so that's even what's being taught, what doctors are being trained in, right? And so it's just, there's so many layers to it. But it strayed very, very far away from healthcare, from actual healthcare.
Well, I mean, I feel like there are some really amazing things that are still being done in at the medical fields, and there's a lot of progress in a lot of things. But it does seem like a mess, and it does seem like people are, on the whole, less healthy, and the information you get given doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And you have to take your own ownership of your health and your wellness, because
totally
you don't get given great advice a lot of the times, and especially if it's going down the chronic versus the acute versus the general health. You don't get any of that support on the general health whatsoever, and that does come from the food and the nutrition. But
right.
I don't know, what's the alternative here?
Yeah, right. It's like the biggest killers globally are chronic disease, heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, all these things.
Inflammation.
Oh, sorry, you cut out for a second. What did you say?
I said all inflammation diseases.
And yeah, so what do we do, right? What do we do? I think that is enter the revival, the emergence of holistic medicine. I mean, we're seeing, at least in the United States, right, we're having so much expansion in the last decade even on Chinese medicine. In particular, Chinese medicine kind of entered US before Ayurveda. So it's a little bit some years ahead. So Chinese medicine, for example, has already been licensed in the United States, meaning you have rights to practice as a doctor and all these things. And so it's huge now. I mean, it's huge, and it's covered by insurance. It's even in some hospitals, like the hospitals that are front runners in being more progressive with their care. Ayurveda is starting to really explode, and I think we're still on just the tip of the iceberg with that. I mean, it's still in its early days. But there are so many ways we can, like you said, a lot of it is self-education. I wish it wasn't the case, but we do kind of have to take our health into our own hands. And there are so many beautiful resources out here for us to learn, whether it's through books or YouTube channels, or practitioners that are around us or do telehealth like I do. There are so many wonderful, wonderful people available now, globally, that have self-educated or that have learned this now or gone to school for it. And people are seeing really increasing push towards it, which is really beautiful, because people have reached their limit. I think they've reached their tolerance with not being listened to, not being treated in a lot of ways that they may desire. Being told there's no chance for you, you just have to take this pill the rest of your life, is not satisfying for most people anymore. They're like, is that really true though? Is that really true? And a lot of times we, in Ayurveda or Chinese medicine, we're here to be like, no, actually we've been working on that for thousands of years, and here's exactly what you can take. And it's working, or else people wouldn't keep coming back, right? So I highly recommend for people that are interested to start exploring these modalities like Ayurveda, TCM, naturopathy, that are much more integrated.
TCM?
Sorry, traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, and yeah, in naturopathy and homeopathy, and see how much amazing holistic approaches there are to at least try before you go straight to a drug or surgery. At least try, right? What do you got to lose?
Well, yeah. Well, how would somebody take their health into their own hands? Like, how would someone weed through all the conflicting information? Because for every for every bit of information that you share, there's somebody or 100 people on the complete other end of the aisle saying the actual opposite thing. Yeah. It's like, what do you do?
I know. We've talked a lot about this. I don't think there is an easy answer, honestly.
So it's just not oil pill and everything's better.
No, I think that you have to, that's why I said feel it, like explore these things, because somebody might really just feel more pulled towards Ayurveda. Somebody might feel more pulled towards naturopathy, and those kind of ways of treatment. Or maybe somebody's really into chiropractics and thinks that that's going to fix them the best. And I would even suggest try as much as you can too, to even see what sticks for you and what really resonates, because I believe there's powers within a lot of these different approaches. I don't just think this is the only way. Of course, it's the way that I am integrated to and that I personally love the most, but there's so many beautiful approaches, and I think keeping an open mind and also, getting that direct experience of them can be really helpful. The other thing I would just say as a word of advice, being in this field and being a healthcare practitioner, I would really recommend, don't just do things on your own. I think I talked to you about this early on. People, I see this too much, that people and I get it, right? People are trying to figure out their own things, and they'll just Google or they'll read one thing and they'll just start taking some herbs, or they'll start doing certain things. And
it's me doing tea.
maybe a little bit you.
Don't at me.
Don't at me. But and again, I totally understand where that's coming from. But I would say if you really want to shortcut having to really weed out so much crazy, conflicting, paradoxical information that it does exist absolutely in the health sphere, and not to mention the details and the nuance that comes with even utilizing herbs and even utilizing food as medicine. We study for years. We study for years to learn the ins and outs of this. So take advantage of people that study this, that we're here to help make it easier for you. We're here to help make sure you get the whole picture, so you don't, take something and then throw something else off, because you didn't have all the information, right? So I think it's always wonderful. Go to, professionals in that area, whether, again, it's a chiropractor, Chinese medicine doctor, Ayurvedic practitioner, whatever it is. It can be so helpful to have them make sure that you are doing maybe what is best for you, or maybe if there's something that might need to be tweaked or changed, right? And it's important to get that insight, I think.
It's just so challenging to weed through the bullshit, honestly. And I spend a lot of time and energy on health and this kind of space, and I still have no fucking idea what's going on. And I'm I can only imagine just normal people, because I'm definitely quite fringe. I mean, not the fringiest fringe, but I'm on the fringe.
Yeah.
And I don't actually have the answer. I don't know how to build a framework for somebody to go and make these necessary steps.
Right.
It's really tough. It's really tough.
No, it is. I mean, you're not wrong. And that's where, I always bring in my little feminine perspective, where it's I don't think that you can truly, with logic alone, get an answer to that. You have to feel it. You have to experience it. Just like you did with oil pulling, right? It's you did it. You saw the results. It doesn't matter now that you could or couldn't find research studies that proved that this does this, this, and that. You saw it happen to your own body. So like that, I think that's kind of the piece that we have to pull in. It's yes, it's great to also look for evidence and look for, research of certain kinds, or longevity of, human trial, and all of this stuff is great. But there are many ways, I think, many ways we can gather data, including through our own experience. And I think that one is just essential, right? You have to feel what things do for you or don't do for you.
You know what's really funny? I can clip moments in this, so any moments I think will be good for little clips, I'll mark it.
Oh,
and
nice.
as you were talking about that, I pressed mark the clip, and it was 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. I didn't even realize.
That's amazing. And right when we started it, right when you started, you said it was 1, 1, 1 or something there.
I was just like, okay, all right. All right, intuition, we get it. I get it. Chill.
Every time we're in a little philosophical debate, the universe is like backing me up on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's come back out a little bit. I really want to talk about the 2 years that you spent in the ashram, because I think this is something that a lot of people don't even think is a thing to do, let alone just, the high achieving like girl from the city just doing this and moving to an ashram for 2 years. And it ties into, I know you did some of the Vipassana stuff that I've dabbled in a little bit. So I'd love to hear about like some of the experiences you had in the ashram, like that whole process. Let's just start from day one to day, 730.
Yeah. It was what a time, So I'll say first, each ashram is really different, right? Especially with like what lineage you're there for. Like, for example, like Tibetan Buddhist ashram, very different from the ashram I was in. Our lineage that I practice is Shaivite tradition, which is like the OG yoga lineage, and has to do with Shiva, like the form of Shiva as well, but so much more than that. And really life in the ashram was and is, I'm sure still, the most intense life and pace I could possibly imagine.
You're living like a monk. You're basically a monk, right?
Yeah. I mean, even really a lot of ways as, what you call a grihastha, which is like a householder person there, not a monk, not a sannyasi. Things are, you're living in that ambiance. Like I was living in a monastery basically, right? With hundreds of monks, male and female monks, and a school for child monks, like little kids who are being
call them chunks.
Oh my god, that's so amazing. I wish I thought of that like 8 years ago. The little chunkers. So the little chunkers were there. They were so cute and wildly powerful. That's a whole thing.
What do you mean?
I mean, these are children who are anywhere from like 0, to 18, right? But they have been raised in the spiritual sciences and yogic and meditative tradition on top of regular schooling. So imagine like what that does to a child. Like, these kids are like the definition of old soul. Like, I remember one of the girls, she was maybe at the time 10, 11. There's so many crazy stories like this too, but she was my little buddy because I taught yoga to the girls. I was like the lead yoga acharya for the kids there too. So I taught the girls, all the little girls every morning, and she became my little buddy. And later on, like in living there, I was having at one point, really hard time. I was like, going through it, and yeah, just going through my own shit. And she came up to me like out of the blue as I'm like kind of sitting in this hall where we all work, and she just like sits down with me and is like, Prasiddha, you're not doing very well. What's going on, Ma? Or whatever. And I'm like, oh yeah, no, it's okay. Like, I'm not feeling that good. And she just sees right through me. And and she sat with me with the most serious face, this like 11-year-old. And she just gave me like crazy advice that should never have come out of an 11-year-old's mouth, that I was like, I don't even know what to respond right now. Like, what? Like, you just were like my therapist at 11 years old. And there are so many moments like this with these kids, but they're just, they're something else entirely. And they'll just, they'll be there meditating for hours, chanting for hours, doing their little yoga for hours. Like, so sweet. So sweet. But yeah, that was the environment I was living in. There's like a goshala on the property too, which is a cow sanctuary. So we had our own cows where we would have milk and stuff from them, and temples there where we would spend every morning doing some pujas in the temple, and which is like a ritual prayer, worship, like offering fire and incense and flowers, and you chant every morning. Every morning we would get up, Adam, at like 3:30 a.m. Yeah. We would do like kriyas, like cleansing techniques, and then we would go to yoga from like 4 to 5:30 a.m. And then we would quickly change, and we would go up to the temple for puja, the prayer. And then we would sit there after for like multiple more hours and usually listen to some discourse, which is called satsang. Swamiji would come and like personally give a talk most days, which was really incredible. That was like such an absolute blessing to be around for 2 years, like amazing. And then only the day would start. So we had already lived so much of a day before even the day began, and then the day would begin, and we would do all of our jobs. Everybody has different jobs in the ashram. Like I mentioned, I was actually the lead of the yoga department, so I ran the yoga department. I taught all the yoga classes for the visitors that came to the ashram, for the people that lived in the ashram, for the kids that lived in the ashram. I was doing a lot. I was managing a lot, doing retreats and yoga teacher trainings as well, all that fun stuff. And we would go till really late at night most nights. The vibe in the ashram would go really late. We would sleep at maybe like 11 if you're lucky, maybe 12, and then we'd get up again at 3:30 a.m. Yeah, it was such a... Honestly, no. No, not really. And this is where we'll get a little more, mystical, but living in the energy field of an enlightened being is like, there's really no words I can explain for what that is like, or how the effect on your system is so interesting. Like the energy levels you have, the bliss that you're just like feeling in you, because they're in that state all the time, and you're living around that energy. That's the best way I can put it, as just thinking in terms of entanglement, right? Like quantum entanglement and all of that we know really does happen, right? Between people, that's happening there. And I think also to mention too, when you're doing a lot of hours of spiritual practice like yoga, meditation, these things, your body is gaining prana, a lot of prana or chi, life force energy, through those practices in the same way that you would get from sleep. So when you're doing those practices, you actually really drastically reduce your need for sleep. And like I've seen this, obviously, right, in my own experience. I lived 2 years with sleeping 3 to 4 hours a night, not affected by that in a negative way, like at all. Like I was on it. I was energetic. I was thriving, and so blissful, and felt the healthiest I've ever been in my life. Also, I will add, was during that time. But it also has to do, it can't, I would give a side note, right? You can't just do that. You can't just do that necessarily in the regular world, and with no supplementation of that prana in other ways, you could say, so easily. That can definitely bring challenges, of course.
Yeah. Wow. I love it. I'm hearing a few kind of similarities between my very, very minor experience of doing the Vipassana. We haven't properly spoken about this.
No.
Because I left, I said goodbye to you. You dropped me to the airport, and then I flew back to Australia. I had 24 hours, and then went straight into the Vipassana.
Yeah.
And turns out I have ADHD. That was what I came. came out with, I understood. Day 8, I'm just, you'd think with no phones or anything going on, I would have chilled. But there's like a song looping in my head over here, and then I'm thinking about a to-do list, and then I'm watching the watcher of the whole thing's there, and then I'm thinking about some other thing, and it's like, what the hell is going on here? Why is this not chilled? And I'm like, okay, maybe there's something else. Maybe this is just how my brain is. That's okay. But that was one interesting part about it, and then the other one was Goenka. I think his name's Goenka. The guy teaching the course, he was mentioning that you don't need much sleep, like you need less sleep because of the way that your body is integrating into the world with this technique. And I've never felt it before, but until this moment, but a few days in, I begun to just feel this vibration at all times. And I was like,
yes.
Just constantly, it's the weirdest thing I've ever experienced.
You're like, I can't believe I'm uttering these words.
Yeah. I know, because I mean, you met me in May, and like I feel like I was on the path, but going from April to August, and then to the Vipassana, and then to the last like 8 months or 6 months of processing this and integrating into my life, I've changed a lot. Things have really changed, and the way I'm navigating the world has also changed, and it's changed for so much better. But that was that was kind of a key part of it.
Wow.
I just like remember sitting there, and I could get. It took a while. The first few days, we began focusing on the breath in the lip, and then you began to focus on the sensations, and then those sensations became like subtle vibrations, and then those subtle vibrations began to go through the whole body, and then by day 4 or 5, I would get straight into the meditation, and we would end up. I would sit down, and straight away I would just be like, like a microwave or something.
Yeah.
And then he was saying, yeah, you're in like a deep state of rest and subtle. You're resting. Your body is so calm that you can feel the subtle vibrations of everything around you. And I would go to try and sleep, and I would be lying down in bed.
Yeah, you're like,
on
wow.
my back, and I couldn't sleep because I'm like, what is going on here? This is ridiculous. I don't really have a point to that story, but I understand.
No, I'm so glad you shared it.
I'm
so glad you shared it. I mean, it's like
so funny.
When we first met, and we were, I would share with you about all my crazy mystical experiences and all that, and and you would be like, yeah, no, like I hear you, but like can't compute that, and I was just like, you will though, you will. I just knew. I was like, let me just sit back and let it all happen. The cards will fall where they may. Yeah. And no, it's it's a beautiful description though, actually, that maybe helps people catch it also more. That energy you describe is like what we're living in the ashram, especially around an enlightened being. On top of like you doing the physical practices yourself that are bringing that prana, that buzz, that vibration, that kundalini is also the word we'll use sometimes for that energy inside of you. You have a being who, like imagine a being who that never turns off for. And so, right, it's like, of course, when you're around them, the closer and closer that you are, you start to buzz in that same frequency too, like without even you doing anything. So it's like, it's a pretty wild thing because you can even in that space be not practicing, not even happy. Maybe you're having a hard day or something. And yet you'll go to like sit with Swamiji. He'll be giving a talk or something. We'll have a meeting, whatever, for the ashram. You'll be around him, and all of a sudden you're like, like, wow, I'm feeling so good and so peaceful and like so energetic and like, whoa, like my body, like all my cells feel like bliss, like pleasure, like all of this amazingness. Cool, like what the heck? And it's always like that. Like it's wild. It's literally always like that. So living in that energy for so long, it obviously has profound impact on you, and in so many ways. And so it's really cool. It's really cool that you got to experience that too, you know, in that way. And it's really pointing to, I believe, the core of who we actually are, like what our natural state really is. Like it's not something that is unnatural to us. Actually, it's getting back to that more than anything. It's not like a discovery, but more a remembrance of that state. In all honesty, like it's uncovering all the muck that has accumulated around us that makes us not feel that all the time. You know, that makes us not notice that all the time. That makes us not present to the wonder, the beauty, the awe, the perfection around us all the time. All these things. Not present for the love that is actually always in us. Not present for the love in others. Like, right, all these things are there. They're just hidden. Like all this stuff just gets layered on through life, through our life experiences, right?
Yeah, it was a lot. I'm still processing a lot of it. And I probably will take some time, much more time to process it. Because people were like, oh, what did you take from? Like, it's hard to explain, but not really anything yet, but I know a lot eventually. You know? It's just so much to just, you can't take anything to begin with. But what was I going to say? The interesting thing, and I'm very... I'm quite analytical. I've been, I studied engineering up until I began going down this pathway. I was like, if I can't prove it and there's not a double-blind placebo study, it doesn't exist, then you're an idiot. That was my logic. And then I began to meditate. And I'm like, I'm feeling calmer. Weird. That's weird. And then I was like, started reading all of these, like, you know, these books about personal development, and realistically a lot of them are just like Western's packaged spiritual books. Really, they're just spiritual teachings put into a framework that like a white guy can understand.
Preach.
And that's great, that's fine. Like, again, it's a tool because my spiritual practice began through reading self-help books,
right?
Because they kept talking about this, like, all this stuff that you can't quite grasp on but exists, and to tap into all of those elements is basically the spiritual way. And then that's led to yoga, and then that's led to doing this, and it's like, you know, every single time I think I've got a grasp of the world, just something else pops in and goes, well, I don't know how to explain this, but at this point I'm just like, whatever. I'm just going to roll with it. So I'm framing that, like, and I'm not an energy again, I use energy person. I've never been one to sit here and kind of consider the energetic fields of the world, and, you know, I hear a lot of my friends love it and are really interested. I never quite got it. But then I do this vibrating thing in the Vipassana. It was like the first time in my life where I felt something like I've never felt before. And I just didn't go out, and I can tap into it a bit easy now. It's a bit tougher in the general world, but it's there. And I came back to my house in Geelong after the Vipassana. And I walked in the front door, and I got hit in the face with just the densest negative energy I've ever felt. And I was like, what the fuck is this? It was the moment I walked into the door, it was just like thick, and I felt anxious straight away. And I was like, fuck, I've been living in this.
You're like, this is like my nest. Like I
This is but I felt it like a ton of, I can't explain. It felt thick. The air felt thick, and I just instantly was anxious. I was walking in that door, and so I called one of my friends, and she's, again, into all this stuff, and I've always been like, hey, whatever. But I'm like, okay, look, can you come and, like, cleanse my house? And she's just like, well, I never would have thought those words would come out of your mouth for sure.
Oh my gosh.
And I went through everything. I looked at everything that I had, and I was just like, what is giving me bad energy? And I threw everything out. I threw out clothes. I threw out plants. I threw out, like, a bookshelf. I was like, I don't give a fuck. I wiped all of my goals off the walls. I just, like, I haven't actually gotten back to rebuilding it yet, but I'm like, I just got super busy with work, but I began just this like removal of all this stuff. It was so funny.
I love it. That's amazing. I love it.
So something I would never have thought. But this leads into my next question, which is, you've experienced a lot, and you've experienced a lot that probably 99.9% of the world, especially the Western world, don't experience. How do you reintegrate into Western society and like survive, let alone thrive? Because it's a completely different world.
Yeah, it's been a process. It's been a learning curve that I had to also go through, in the last few years, especially since I moved back from India, which was in 2019 now. Wow. Yeah. So
not that long ago.
Yeah. In a way though, I'm like, wow, I can't believe it was that long ago also. 4 years, but a lot has happened in 4 years. So much. My whole life has transformed in 4 years, like literally every single thing about my life. And for me, it was, I think because I had such a strong clarity, honestly, Adam, in my heart on who I was, who I am, and what I wanted to be in the world, how I wanted to play my role. It gave me a lot of just clarity and confidence to come back into this whole new world and restart my life here, because I knew that I needed to be here. That's really like the only thing I can say is like I knew I needed to be here. I knew, at least for now, my role was here where I was, born. And for whatever reason, I had that feeling like, maybe I am supposed to be kind of a bridge to a lot of people who are never going to get a chance to go to India, or are never going to maybe even learn directly under a guru, who that's like too much for. But here's a girl who they can relate to, who grew up in California and who, was raised Christian. And so many people have stories like that here, of course. And so that's what I find, so many people connect with me because of that. And that's so beautiful. And I don't know, that in itself has given me a lot of just like, I think, clarity and strength throughout that transition. And then I also had to learn a lot. I had to learn a lot of lessons too about really stepping into my career and stepping into, accepting more financial abundance, because I felt there can be these like weird things that come up, especially in the spiritual world, where we sometimes cognize like that there is a conflict between material existence and spirituality, which I firmly do not believe. But it can be deeply programmed in us. And also it can be just projected onto us. I would say more often than not, I've had it more projected onto me than anything. If you're spiritual, you shouldn't charge anything for your time and life and energy and services. If you're a healer, you shouldn't charge. You should just be giving for free. And it's like, that's awesome, but that's not the way I can even be available to serve. If I'm not, if it's when that was the case, for example, in more indigenous civilizations, this was happening for doctors and healers, but it's because they were taken care of. They were taken care of by the village. They didn't make money, but they had everything that they needed, provided for them. It was a virtuous cycle, a type of civilization that was living in, but we don't live in that kind of civilization right now. I hold space that we will one day maybe, but we don't live in that world. And so I think that is definitely something I had to work through, or face, I should even say, when I kind of re-emerged back in the West and started up my business and started up my practice. And it was more like really addressing those things inside of me and realizing, breaking through those patterns of people pleasing and like accepting that no matter what I do, somebody won't like it. I'm not going to make everyone happy, and that's okay. And I'm not going to be for everyone, and that's also okay. And, it's actually even better, because who I am for are going to find me, and I'm going to, more importantly, not compromise on who I am and get lost in the process, So that's been a lot of my process, honestly, of reintegrating in the West.
Yeah, I understand that kind of idea. And you said this to me actually, where you said, money is energy, and it's the framework of our, existence now. And there's been a lot of positive things that have come from the ability for people to not have to, keep track of everything that they've given to somebody, and this medium exchange in the middle has allowed society to kind of really develop into what we've got here. Yes, there are their problems, but there's also some pretty wild things that we've achieved as a human society.
Absolutely.
And maybe there's a balance eventually. So I think, and the other thing is, money's energy, but money's also leverage. And for someone in your position and with your vision and your goals to help lift other people, up and help show them a way that they can live a healthy and happy life through Ayurveda, leverage is required to reach a wider audience. So to do that, you need money. So it's kind of just like,
it is what it is. It's absolutely a part of it. And my coach, he really said it so beautifully, and was like, can you help more people making more money or less money?
Yeah. Exactly.
What is everything, everything that I had mapped out, my whole vision of I want to have land, a healing center, a retreat center, property.
Money.
And it's I want to hire people. I want to make people have a living too, people that I love, and give them abundance and share all of that so that people can be free of jobs that they loathe and all these kind of things, right? And it's what did all that require? That all requires a lot of funds, and that's okay. It's awesome. Okay, here's what we need to make it happen. And we don't need to have resistance to that. We don't have to judge it. We don't have to feel any negative way about it. It's a resource, right? Yeah, it's an energy to support that creation.
Well, the other the analogy that they use in the in the planes, where they're make sure you put your mask on before helping others. You can't help anybody if you don't help yourself.
Totally.
And this ties into finances as well. When you're set, you can give better than when you're unsettled and you don't have a strong foundation.
Yep, so true.
Food for thought. So, for the non-spiritual people, the people that are just beginning this journey, what would you recommend to them to get started?
In terms of starting their spiritual journey, or health journey, what in particular?
Let's go with spiritual. Just my main question was, how do you go about finding your peace? But I want to kind of tie that into something that people can actually use as well.
Okay. In the Vedic tradition, there's no difference between learning and discovering who you are and learning who God is. It's one and the same. And I really believe that the single greatest and most important thing we can do as human beings to not only heal ourselves but change the world, actually, from the space of changing ourselves and our relationships and our interactions with the world, is to really dive deep into what that is, in that question, who am I? And this practice is called Atma Vichara in Sanskrit. It's basically self-inquiry, right? It's a huge, huge concept and practice within Eastern tradition, and that's what I would encourage, because it doesn't require you reading every perfect book or listening to 1,000,000 hours of anything or going anywhere. It requires you going in and really asking yourself. It's asking yourself the right questions. It's really legitimately meditating and introspecting on, who am I? Who is the one that is perceiving me? Who is the one that is watching the thoughts happen now, right? And there's a whole series of questions you can go through. But I would say, just to start off with, it's really that fundamental, who are you? What part of you never dies? That is the fundamentals of Hindu and Buddhist meditation, is meditation on that which is permanent. beyond your body, beyond your mind, all the identifications. Who are you? What exists after that? What exists when this doesn't exist? And I think the more that we sit in that space, honestly, just sit in that space of, first it's really uncomfortable. Sometimes then it feels weird. Next, it feels really scary and terrifying, because you start to have some type of ego deaths kind of start to happen to you, right? Of all the ideas of self that you up here have long associated with, right? We go through stages with it, but that work of really sitting in that space, I think, is one of the most important things to start with on the spiritual path, you know?
And so how would somebody do that? So like begin a meditation practice, begin to journal?
So that can really be practiced in two primary ways. Traditionally, it would be done in a state of meditation, right? Meditating upon those questions, meditating upon the I. The I am is what it's called, you know, in Sanskrit, like meditating on the I am. And also another way you can make it a little more tangible, and sometimes this is very helpful for me, even in my years of doing this, is writing it down, like journaling into it, and kind of going through a journaling meditation process kind of that way of introspection and seeking self, seeking source, whatever you want to call it. Going into that self-discovery process, because that's outside of any religion, that's outside of any dogma, that's outside of any, that's also the core of what most things are pointing to, actually, but gets really lost in translation a lot of the time, is that self-realization process.
Yeah, cool. Okay. I like it. So, what advice would you give yourself from 10 years ago?
Oh, wow. I think most important thing I would tell myself is to be gentler and kinder and more loving to myself, because at that stage I was still in the heart of like just holding myself to such a high standard, and I didn't realize that level of self-judgment and perfectionism was so hurtful to me, and also hurtful to others too, because I would reflect, project that onto other people too, right? And that's what I would share, is really just to relax into all the imperfections, and know that you are loved beyond performance, like any performance, that's not a requirement for love, and that's not a requirement for acceptance, and that really ultimately you got to give that to yourself, girl. You got to give yourself all that. Nothing else is happening until you give yourself all that.
I was about to say that, you're loved and accepted, but who you're loved and accepted by, it sounds like it needs to be by you.
Absolutely. That's always the foundation.
It is the foundation. Again, put your mask on before helping others.
Yeah.
So what's the best piece of advice you've been given?
Wow.
I'm not making these easy, am I?
Oh, this is like the hardest one probably, because I've been given beautiful advice.
What was the first thing that popped into your head?
I'm really like going through now, like Actually, funny enough, I was thinking of a lot of things from my guru, but then I also thought of something from my mom, and that one really, I'll share that one because it's stuck with me for so long, since I was a kid. But she always really instilled in me from a really young age, amidst like all the chaos of our life at that time, that we were being taken care of, that we were being looked out for, and whether somebody calls that God or calls that the life or the universe, or higher self, it doesn't matter to me. To me, it's all the same essence, and I felt that presence since I can remember myself. And I've seen that what she said is true. You know, we'd be in these moments where it literally felt like a life or death situation, or, you know, there was like a lot of threat to our survival at the time in many instances. And she always held that space, like, even in the midst of like when you don't understand, you do not understand how you're going to get out of this or how you're going to make it through or anything like that. You're totally just at a loss. Something has your back, like you're being held and you will always be taken care of, and to like have that trust on life. And that single-handedly, having that belief inside me, just the belief alone has,
It'll be okay.
Yeah, has number one gotten me through so much and given me a lot of resilience, but also I've seen that because I believe that to be true, it is true. Like, I don't feel a victim to life, and I don't play that story, like, and I don't manifest more of that story, you know? It's because I actually believe like things are working for me, not against me, you know? And life isn't sadistic and it's not out to get me. And even in those ugly, ugly moments, there's something there. There's some reason, there's a reason, there's a purpose to it all, you know? And so I know that wasn't just one saying, but that's that principle my mom really instilled in me that I feel like has been just invaluable in a lot of ways.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
And okay, so if you've got a perfect day, what would that look like? What would your perfect day look like? Just a normal day.
Oh, okay. My perfect day would be, I would get up early, but like naturally. Like I would wake up on my own at like 5 a.m. and I would do a lovely yoga practice. I would end with some pranayama, like breath regulation and meditating with that breath. Yeah. I was like doing alternate nostril breathing. That's my fave. I would do some chanting. Like I love listening to like mantras and chanting. I would listen to some of that, go into some meditation. I would make myself a nice breakfast. I would read a good book that's expanding my mind or my consciousness. And really like, I would just do what I'm doing already. I would serve, like I would serve in the ways that I feel like is my dharma, is my purpose. And it's really beautiful to get asked that because I actually feel like that is like what I'm doing, you know? And I'm really, really grateful. Of course, there's still always ways to expand and to grow, but yeah, I feel really blessed to get to be in that space where I do feel like I'm so lit up by my work and what I get to do all day and working with beautiful human beings and all of that jazz. And then I would spend time with loved ones. That's huge for me. I'm a really hard worker, but I love play. I love enjoyment. I would love to end the day with my favorite people and dancing and listening to good music and maybe doing... Oh. Okay.
Hello, we're back. We're recording again. Weird. I don't know what happened then.
It's okay. I also have to go, so maybe this can be the last question or something.
This is the last question. Yeah, that's fine. I got to go too. So anyway, so you've got your...
Where do we get cut off?
I'm not too sure. That's all right. That's all right. Maybe it wasn't meant to be. That's okay. Final question for you is, what is the why of all this? What is the meaning of life?
What is the meaning of life? Meaning of life, as I perceive it, is for consciousness to know itself. That's it.
Sure.
That's it. Okay. That's the like Indian
so that
like
journey.
Head bob. That's how like yeah, it's for consciousness to know itself, to experience itself, in all the bliss that it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. We'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for coming on the episode, Prasiddha. appreciate you and I appreciate your time and hope it was enjoyable.
It was so fun. Thanks for having me, Adam, and we'll chat soon.